The cold rain hit the dark Vienna street. Elena shivered, starving for 5 days, huddled on stone steps. Her flimsy coat offered no protection against the biting wind. A security guard snapped, "You can't loiter here," his voice indifferent to her plight. Her legs failed as she tried to stand, collapsing her onto the wet concrete. Lucas, a 37-year-old single dad, and his son, Theo, emerged from a store. Theo tugged his sleeve. "Daddy, she's going to disappear." Without hesitation, Lucas dropped his bags, ran forward, and gently lifted the frail girl into his arms. The sudden attention felt like an electric shock. Elena's body, already operating on empty reserves, went rigid with shock and shame as Lucas carried her, his strong arms a shocking contrast to her gaunt frame. The crowd parted, their silence now heavier than any noise. Lucas's action was deliberate, confronting the silent, hostile judgment of the room. He set her down gently on a worn plastic chair near the magazine rack, his focus unwavering. The cashier's eyes narrowed, ready to intervene, but Lucas simply held out his debit card, his gaze firm. "Bread, bottled water, and a heat pack, please. The biggest one you have." He spoke to the cashier, but his every movement was directed at Elena, a silent promise of safety. He wasn't asking for permission. He was stating a non-negotiable necessity. Once they were settled, Lucas knelt, breaking off a piece of the crusty baguette. He brought the warm, fragrant bread close to her face. "Eat this, slowly. It's all right, Elena. There is no rush and no audience." Elena flinched back from the food, her hands shaking violently. Her voice was a cracked whisper, fueled by a fragile, crumbling pride. I really don't need charity. I'm okay. I can leave now." The words were weak, collapsing under the weight of her starvation. The denial was purely instinctual, a reflex developed to ward off pity, which she felt was worse than hunger itself. Yet the scent of the yeast and the warm, slightly nutty aroma of the fresh bread overwhelmed her last shred of willpower. Her stomach betrayed her, a loud, humiliating groan echoing in the sudden silence of the aisle. The sound was too much. Elena buried her face in her hands and wept, the deep, ragged sobs of utter, hopeless despair finally releasing the pressure of the last 5 days. Lucas remained kneeling, a steady, calm presence. He didn't touch her, sensing she needed space, but his voice was a warm anchor. "Conscious decisions can wait," he murmured. "Right now your body needs fuel. Your fight is over for 5 minutes." He turned to Theo. "Hey, little man, why don't you go sit at the coloring station in the corner? Draw us a monster, okay? I need a minute with Elena." Theo, wise beyond his 6 years, nodded solemnly. He didn't move far, but kept a protective watch over them, sketching rapidly, as if documenting the scene. As Elena finally began to eat, her movements were clumsy, desperate, almost animalistic, driven by survival instinct. Lucas had to physically guide her to slow down, fearing she would make herself sick. She didn't taste the food, she just swallowed it, desperately trying to anchor herself back to reality. Lucas gave her privacy in that desperate moment, his gaze fixed on the floor. When the first immediate panic of hunger subsided, he finally spoke. "Tell me one thing," he asked, his tone gentle but direct. "Why are you here, on the street, and not where you're supposed to be?" Vienna is a cold place to hide. Elena clutched her torn backpack tighter. "I ran away." That was all she offered. She couldn't admit the full truth. She feared that if she spoke the words abuse or control, the judgment she saw on the street would solidify in his eyes. She feared pity more than the cold. She was afraid he would realize she was damaged, ruined goods, and send her back out. Lucas watched her defensive posture, her eyes darting like a trapped bird. "I won't ask again," he promised, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "But I will offer this. You can crash on my sofa. It's safe. It's warm. Just one night to get your strength back." Elena immediately pulled back, standing up so fast the plastic chair rattled. "Absolutely not. I can't stay in a strange man's apartment. I don't trust you." Lucas stood too, meeting her fear with simple, disarming honesty. He pointed to Theo, now happily sketching a multi-eyed creature. My place has a man, a very talkative, 6-year-old man who judges me constantly. The sheer absurdity of the statement cracked her composure. She managed a weak, watery laugh, her first expression of anything but terror in days. You don't owe me anything, Lucas continued, serious again. But 5 days without food is a medical emergency. You are not strong enough to be alone in the city tonight. She looked down at her soaked, broken shoes, then at the gentle concern on Theo's face. The choice was clear: pride or survival. She gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. As they gathered their things, making their way to the checkout, the sharp-faced woman who had been watching them leaned in again. They really know how to play the victim, don't they? Pathetic. Now he's taking her home. Such a hero. Elena shrank instantly, shame burning her cheeks. Lucas stopped dead. He turned to the woman, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the general noise of the store. She is not playing anything, he stated firmly. She is fighting to survive, something you wouldn't understand. Elena's breath hitched. A tiny sob escaped her throat. No one ever had publicly taken her side like that. As they left, the old woman who owned the store, a woman named Frau Miller, hurried from behind the counter. She pressed a small, warm pastry into Lucas's hand, looking at Elena with genuine, unfeigned kindness. That girl has good eyes, son, she murmured. She's not bad. I hope you can save her. The rain had stopped, but the cold remained when they reached Lucas's building. Elena stood frozen outside the apartment door, numbers 3B glowing faintly on the wood, for a full 10 minutes. She was unable to cross the threshold. This small, ordinary place represented everything she had lost: safety, routine, and belonging. Stepping into a warm, intact home felt like a colossal betrayal of the streets, a theft when she was homeless. She was paralyzed by the fear that she didn't belong, that she would ruin the peace. Suddenly, the door swung open. Theo rushed out, not with a toy, but with a bright dinosaur-themed umbrella over her head. "You're getting soaked again. Come on, we made soup. It smells great." The sheer, uncomplicated welcome of the child finally broke her hesitation. She took a slow, trembling step inside. The apartment was small but overwhelmingly warm, scented with wood polish and cooking spices. Theo's drawings, vibrant, chaotic scenes of spaceships, animals, and what looked like a superhero named Captain Clean, were taped everywhere, a testament to a life lived openly and with love. A gentle, savory scent of vegetable soup filled the air from the kitchen. Elena stood rigidly in the middle of the living room, a statue of an unwelcome alien guest. Lucas, recognizing her panic, didn't push. He simply handed her a thick, clean bath towel and a stack of folded clothes. "These are my late wife's. They should fit. They are clean and soft. No need to thank me. Just focus on feeling safe tonight, Elena. That's all I ask." That last phrase, "just focus on feeling safe," was the final key. It was an instruction, a permission slip, a command to stop running, if only for an evening. Elena retreated to the bathroom and stood under the weak light, touching the soft fabric of the borrowed sweatshirt. She wept, not from pain, but from the overwhelming shock of unconditional, unsolicited kindness. During dinner, the atmosphere was quiet, yet utterly domestic. Theo was unusually careful. He picked up the smallest, most desirable piece of grilled chicken from his plate, his favorite part, and reached across the table. "I saved this for you, Elena," he said, pushing the small prize toward her. "Daddy says you need to catch up." Elena's throat tightened, and she couldn't speak, utterly choked by the child's pure generosity. "Thank you, Theo," she finally whispered, forcing the words out. "It's been a long time since I had a proper meal that someone cooked just for me." Lucas and Theo exchanged a subtle glance. It was a shared, nonverbal acknowledgement that this young woman had been desperately deprived of care and nourishment for far too long. After the meal, the simple act of safety and shared humanity loosened Elena's tongue. She sat huddled on the sofa, clutching a mug of tea, and told them everything. She was a foreign student who came to Vienna with dreams of a better life. She met an older man, sophisticated and charming at first. Then the control began. Emotional abuse, physical violence, isolation. He systematically took her money, convincing her she was incompetent and crushed her independence until she was completely reliant on him. When she finally escaped, it was with nothing but the clothes on her back in the fear that he would use his money and connections to find her. She was living rough, terrified he would find her. Lucas listened without interruption, without judgment. He didn't ask for the abuser's name. It wasn't relevant. His focus was on the present crisis. He asked the only question that truly mattered. Do you want to keep running, or do you want to stop and start over? Elena's voice was barely audible, thick with defeat. I have nothing left to start with. He took my papers, my savings, my confidence. Lucas gently shook his head. Yes, you do. He took your belongings, but you still have yourself. And that is where everything begins. Just as the fragile hope began to bloom, a sudden, violent, aggressive banging erupted at the front door. Elena flinched so hard the tea sloshed onto her borrowed clothes. She scrambled behind the sofa, her hands covering her head, instantly reverting to pure survival mode. Lucas sighed, a weariness entering his posture, and opened the door. It was Marcus, their unpleasant neighbor, a man whose sole enjoyment seemed to be judging others. Marcus immediately fixed a hateful stare on the exposed corner of the living room where Elena was hiding. What kind of filth are you bringing into this building, Meyer? I saw you in the street. Bringing home stray dogs? The streets are full of scammers and parasites. Elena's face went white. She wanted to disappear, the shame more painful than the physical hunger had been. Lucas instantly moved, stepping into the hallway and positioning his large body squarely between Marcus and the vulnerable Elena. She is my guest, he said, his voice flat, dangerously calm, containing all his protective fury. You will address her with respect, or you will not address her at all. Marcus sneered, his eyes flicking over Elena's terrified form, seeing only what he wanted to see. Looks like garbage to me. You'll regret this, Meyer. Elena felt her spirit crumple, the shame a physical crushing weight. Marcus spat on the floor near the threshold, a final, deliberate act of disrespect, then stomped away, muttering threats about calling the landlord. Lucas slammed the door shut, the sound echoing the finality of the confrontation. He turned to Elena, his eyes blazing with a protective fire she had never seen directed at her. No one, he declared, walking quickly over and pulling her up gently, is allowed to call you that in this house. No one. That stops now. Elena finally allowed herself to collapse into his chest, unable to hide the pain. Theo, watching from the kitchen doorway, walked slowly over. He didn't say a word about the man. He just sat beside her on the sofa, silent, and then offered her his beloved, worn teddy bear, Mr. Snuggles. He protects me from monsters, the boy whispered, his small hand patting her knee clumsily. You're not bad, Elena. You're just sad. Mr. Snuggles will help. The confrontation with Marcus had cemented Lucas's conviction. Elena wasn't just safe on the street, she was in danger. The next morning, Lucas insisted on taking Elena to a specialized women's support center, a place where she could get confidential professional help and legal advice. It felt like the right, logical next step toward rebuilding her life, a place where she could finally regain her power. As they walked up the broad, busy steps of the city building, Elena scanned the street nervously, a habit born of weeks of hiding. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She could still feel the phantom gaze of her abuser. Then she saw it, a sleek black sedan, the tinted windows, chillingly familiar, cruised slowly past the entrance. It was too clean, too expensive, and moving with a deliberate, predatory speed. It paused just briefly at the corner, and a shadow moved behind the glass. Elena's color instantly drained to an alarming gray. She grabbed Lucas's arm, her grip frantic, her nails digging in. He found me, she gasped, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror. He followed me. He knows where I went. Lucas instantly understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a story about a runaway student. This was a pursuit by a powerful, vindictive man. Her abuser wasn't just an ex-boyfriend. He was a narcissist with resources who viewed Elena as his property, his asset to control. He wasn't giving her up. Lucas, a simple repairman, suddenly found himself in the middle of a serious game of cat and mouse. Lucas grabbed her hand, pulling her back down the steps, away from the glass entrance. He looked at the black car, then down at Elena's terrified face. His jaw set hard. He squeezed her hand, a promise etched in the pressure. "We're not going back to the streets, and we are not staying here," he stated, decisive and cold. "We're disappearing again, but this time we're disappearing together." They quickly reversed course, walking fast through the side streets, Lucas using his knowledge of the city's alleys and shortcuts to lose any potential tail. Elena, still reeling from the sighting, broke down as they ducked into a small, quiet park. "Why are you doing this for me?" she pleaded, tears blurring her vision, now convinced he was risking his son for her. "I'm a complete stranger. You have a son to protect. You should just walk away, Lucas. I am too much trouble." Lucas didn't answer immediately. They walked in silence for a long, painful minute, the sounds of the city fading into a dull hum compared to the intensity of the moment. Finally, he stopped at a cold stone bridge railing overlooking the canal, the sluggish water reflecting the somber sky. He looked out at the moving water, a deep, abiding sorrow and regret clouding his eyes. "Because," he finally said, his voice raw, catching in his throat, "I once watched my wife walk away from our home in tears, and I couldn't save her. I let her go." Elena froze. The air stilled around them, filled only by the whisper of the wind over the canal. She had always wondered about Theo's mother, sensing a deep, unspoken loss in the quiet apartment, but she never dared to ask. Lucas told her the story, haltingly, in fragmented, painful bursts. His wife, Maya, had suffered from severe postpartum depression after Theo's birth, a darkness that consumed her slowly. He, Lucas, had been too consumed by work, picking up every repair job, every extra shift, too focused on providing a financially stable life, that he completely missed the desperate signs of her illness. He missed the quiet desperation in her eyes. He mistook her silence for contentment. "I was there, Elena," he whispered, his eyes now welling up. "I was in the same apartment, but I didn't see her. She told me she felt trapped, invisible. One day she simply left a note saying she had to find silence and peace, and she walked away. We found her a week later. It was too late. I hadn't been able to shield her, to defend her from the darkness that consumed her." Lucas's voice broke, thick with years of guilt and grief that he carried like a physical weight. "I swore to myself, when I stood by that river after she was gone, I swore that if life ever gave me another chance to save someone, to intervene, to just see them, truly see the pain behind the walls they build, I wouldn't hesitate. I wouldn't waste it on fear." The impact of his confession was staggering. Elena brought a trembling hand to her mouth, the tears that followed not of self-pity for her own situation, but of profound shared recognition with his pain. She saw the true source of his selflessness. It was born of a failure he desperately needed to redeem. She saw herself not as damaged, not as a burden, but as a chance for a kind man to finally win a battle he thought he had lost forever. For the first time, she saw herself as someone worthy of being saved, not just an object to be rescued. Lucas turned from the canal, his eyes locking with hers, no longer holding simple sorrow, but a fierce, protective certainty. He spoke the words that would change everything, slowly, deliberately, giving them the weight of a solemn vow. "Pack your things, you're coming home." Elena shook her head, confusion mixing with overwhelming emotion. "But I don't have anything to pack. And I don't have a home, Lucas. I'm just a refugee on your sofa." He stepped closer, placing his hands firmly on her shoulders, grounding her to the present. "Yes, you do," he countered, the words ringing with conviction. "Home is not a building, Elena. Home is where people choose you, and they build a shield around you. And I choose you. Theo chooses you. Now let's go home and make a new plan." A women's support worker, who had stepped out for a quick break and was standing nearby, paused as they walked past. She recognized the profound shift in the young woman's posture. She whispered softly to no one in particular, "That girl, the world truly needs more men like him to heal." Lucas's choice was absolute and immediate. The fear of the black sedan was countered by a strategic, daily plan. Lucas didn't just offer his sofa, he offered structure. He helped Elena go back to the police, ensuring she had a safe escort and coaching her through the difficult, painful process of reporting the abuse and providing what little evidence she had. It was agonizing, forcing her to relive the trauma, but Lucas was a steady anchor. He took her to get a proper medical checkup, bought her a few essential new pieces of clothing. Not hand-me-downs, but simple, dignified things just for her. The process of dealing with the bureaucracy of foreign student visas and police reports was exhausting. Every form, every interview was a potential trigger. Yet Lucas, with his methodical repairman's brain, treated the legal mess like a broken pipe. Analyze the system, find the leak, and fix it. He used his connections as a handyman to help her find an affordable, flexible course to refresh her skills and start the paperwork to replace her stolen student documents. Elena, who had only ever known conditional, abusive attention, struggled deeply to comprehend this selfless help. She was used to being belittled, forced to earn every scrap of affection. This kindness felt like a trap she hadn't yet sprung. "Aren't you afraid I'll be too much trouble?" she asked him one evening, her voice small, scrubbing the kitchen counter with desperate intensity. "I'm a disruption, a risk. Marcus is probably right." Lucas looked up from fixing Theo's bicycle, his expression one of simple bafflement, wiping grease from his hands. "Elena, look at me. You are a human being," he replied as if stating the most obvious law of nature. "You are not a burden. My house simply got crowded, not weighed down. And if you're scrubbing that counter any harder, you'll scrub the paint off." The humor, gentle and dry, made her pause. Theo, her tiny guardian angel, became an active participant in her recovery. He didn't just check on her constantly, he began to assign her roles. "Elena, can you check if Captain Clean's cape is symmetrical?" Or, "Elena, Daddy needs this wrench. Can you hand it to him?" He normalized her presence. "Is she okay now, Daddy?" he would still ask every morning. "Does she still have to be sad?" But the answer grew brighter each day. Slowly, tentatively, Elena began to smile more. Her shoulders relaxed, losing the perpetual tension of flight. The color returned to her cheeks. She was no longer a frightened bird, but a woman regaining her footing. She started small, tutoring Theo in basic German, she was fluent, organizing Lucas's chaotic toolbox, a major victory for him. She secured a part-time job working evenings at a quiet university library, a place where she felt both intellectually stimulated and safe, surrounded by the quiet order of books. One evening after she received her library ID badge, Lucas invited her to eat dinner with them at the small kitchen table. Not as a guest they were feeding, but as a confirmed member of the family unit. Elena sat across from them, watching Lucas tease Theo about his messy drawing, seeing the easy, uncomplicated love flow between father and son. Her eyes shone, reflecting the warmth in the gentle light of the lamp. This was the family she never had, a genuine functional haven built on trust and protection. As she began clearing the plates, still driven by an instinct to serve, Lucas stopped her. He reached out to gently take her hand, stopping her motion. "You don't have to try to be perfect to stay here, Elena. You don't have to earn this. You just have to be you." The dam broke again. Tears warmer and less desolate than before dripped onto his hand, onto the tabletop. For the first time in years, perhaps her entire life, she felt an authentic sense of belonging. This place, this little family, chose her. If you believe that one single act of kindness can save a life, type in the comments, "I will choose kindness." 6 weeks later, Elena was unrecognizable. Her body was healthy, her mind sharp, and her spirit resilient. The fear, though lingering, was now a dull echo, not a scream. With her first proper library paycheck, she bought small, thoughtful gifts. A new, sturdy pair of working gloves for Lucas, replacing his ancient ones, and a sophisticated book about astrophysics for Theo. The first time she had been on the receiving end of pure, simple gratitude, earned not through pity, but through her own effort. One bright spring afternoon, the three of them took a walk along the Danube River, the water sparkling under a benevolent sun. The air was soft, filled with the promise of summer and the scent of budding lilacs. Theo, full of energy, bounced along between them, his small hand instinctively finding Elena's, a gesture that was now completely natural. He looked up at her, his expression earnest, as if asking the most important question in the world. Elena, can you stay forever? Not just on the sofa. Like, really stay? Elena paused, a rush of overwhelming protective emotion catching her off guard. She looked across the path at Lucas, who stopped walking, his hands in his pockets, waiting for her answer, his face a careful mask of patience. Lucas stood still for a moment, letting the sound of the river fill the space. He decided to speak first, removing all pressure from Elena. His voice was low and honest, carrying across the gentle air. I want you to stay, Elena. I need to be clear. It's not out of pity or because you need saving anymore. It's because you've become the anchor in our chaos. You've filled this house with laughter and light, and you make Theo's dreams bigger. You've made our two broken pieces feel whole. Elena's eyes, now clear and bright with unshed emotion, met his. I never had a home, she confessed quietly. I had places I lived and people who controlled me. But here, I feel safe. I feel solid. I feel chosen. And I don't want to be anywhere else. Lucas walked slowly toward her, his gaze steady. A world of meaning, grief, redemption, and budding hope, passing between them. He reached out and gently rested his hand on her cheek, a tender gesture of acceptance and commitment. Then stay, he whispered. Stay, and let's start figuring out the next chapter. Elena nodded, the decision simple and profound. Happy tears streamed down her face. Tears of renewal, not despair. Theo let out a triumphant whoop. Yes, I knew it! We're a pack! He shouted, throwing his arms around both of them in a fierce, clumsy hug, completing the circle of their accidental family. That evening, Elena prepared dinner. It was a simple meal but cooked with love. She carefully placed the smallest, most perfect piece of grilled chicken on Theo's plate, remembering his sacrifice on that first terrible night. Then she plated the same small prize piece for Lucas. The gesture wasn't about repayment. It was a symbol of shared memory, shared respect, and the quiet, permanent establishment of their new domestic order. The empty house of loneliness was now a home, overflowing with warmth, laughter, and the promise of a future built together. If you believe stories of silent dedication and hidden integrity deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people are creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.